Carl has a secret. One he never plans to share, especially with Ilsa, his nosy tenant from next door. She's far too eager to know where he's been, what's in the bag, and when could she finally meet his wife. But enough about her. Carl closes the door behind him, his attention now solely on two things: his wife, Elena, and the dinner they're about to share. He's prepared candles, wine, and homemade soup, but Carl has an even better surprise in store. The meal finished, he pushes his wife's wheelchair toward the back door. Tonight is the night. They're finally going outside, together. Beyond the door is some kind of machine, hidden from the rest of the world by rose hedges. Carl has strung up lights and brought out a gramophone for music. He thinks to himself that everything is absolutely perfect as he pulls the ropes down from the machine, connects them to himself and Elena. Then, using his body and the machine like a hoist, he lifts his wife into a standing position. "Beautiful," he exclaims as he pulls her into his arms for their first ever dance. The song Boda Negra plays as they sway to and fro, hand in hand, and as the ropes control Elena's movements, as the string of her mask snaps, we see her rotting, decomposing face. Elena by Jorge Jaramillo is a horror comic inspired by a true historical tragedy. It's a tale of loneliness and that longing for companionship becoming twisted into a grim obsession. It's a view into emotional extremes and how they erode the moral and societal boundaries, giving rise to participating in the taboo. If you're new here, I'm Mo, and I like to talk about spooky things in a not-so-spooky way. And tonight we're covering the story of Elena, as well as the unfortunate, true case of Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos. This is your spoiler and trigger warning. So, if you're ready, sit back, get cozy, and let the nightmare begin. Let's rewind to the beginning of this story. There were tons of details that immediately would have hinted to Elena's fate, so I decided not to tell you those in the beginning, or else it would give it away instantly. When we first catch a glimpse of her in Carl's house, her hands are tied to the wheelchair, and her fingers appear broken and rigid. She doesn't speak or move on her own, and we never get a clear shot of her until she's outside in the garden. Then there's that uncanny mask with the painted face and how her limbs were contorted and twisted all wrong as Carl pulled her from the chair. The maggots that wiggled and writhed at the edges of her mask. And remember earlier when I told you that Boda Negra was the song Carl chose to dance to? If you know the lyrics, then it's quite telling of this entire tale. Unfortunately for Carl, his tenant Ilsa couldn't contain her curiosity anymore. She's climbed over the garden wall, fallen into the yard below, and has seen absolutely everything. If she weren't so appalled by the fact Carl's wife is a corpse, she might have noticed his reaction to the mask falling from Elena's face and breaking along with his delusion. He's horrified and confused, overwhelmed with the loss of Elena because seeing the corpse without the mask reveals the truth, but only for a moment. He hears Ilsa's voice in the yard and returns, believing his wife has come back to him. Once he realizes it's Ilsa who's threatened to tell everyone, well, he adds Elena's corpse in the basement with at least 4 other victims, then returns to the dining room table where Ilsa now sits in the wheelchair. She's dead with the cracked mask over her face, and she is the new Elena, for now. Carl's inner thoughts during this scene are quite interesting, hinting that the cycle of delusion and realization has happened many times over, and that he replaces the body once the decomposition progresses beyond preservation. And all of this makes you wonder, who was the first, the true Elena? 3 months pass and a woman knocks on Carl's door. She's responding to the ad he took out in the paper, looking for a new tenant now that Ilsa is no longer with us. This woman is tall, young, and beautiful with long dark hair. And her name? Dyer. Elena Dyer. Carl's eyes light up with excitement, and we're given a flashback of his youth immediately after. This story will constantly push and pull us between the past and present to better understand Carl and the events that lead up to the finale. His memory is from 50 years ago when he was still a school-aged boy. He sits in the classroom reading a poem by Edgar Allan Poe titled Dreams, a poem that explores the idea of escapism through the dream world, shielding oneself from harsh realities. He overhears two boys, Mike and Tony, discussing an initiation ritual that involves jumping off of a balcony. Then a young girl named Margaret enters, warning the boys that the place they're talking about is cursed. She says a century ago there was a millionaire named Jonathan Shepard who lived with his family on the cliff. They were happy until an awful plague took their youngest son, then their daughter. The mother, desperate and hopeless, jumped to her death from the balcony that overlooks the lake. Then Jonathan Shepard followed, thinking he would be reunited with his family. The manor was eventually turned into a hotel, but the curse of Shepherd's Cliff turned the hotel and its balcony into a suicide hotspot. As she tells the story, Carl's morbid curiosity is piqued, as well as his interest in Margaret. He listens further as she talks favorably about the school's champion diver, clearly taken with his courage, experience, and talent, saying that no one in the school is capable of jumping into the lake unless they're as wonderful as he is. The rest are cowardly little boys in her eyes, so Carl shuts his book and volunteers to jump. The group has reached the hotel, but Carl looks nervous. Mike teases him about the brace on his leg, a reminder of his previous battle with polio when he was younger. Then Margaret comes to his rescue, grabbing his hand and leading him inside. It's clear that she's manipulating Carl, using his emotions to edge him on, but he doesn't seem to realize. Once inside, they come across the portrait of Jonathan Shepard's wife, the one who took her own life, Elena Shepard. Carl stares at the portrait in wonder, quoting Lenore, another of Poe's poems, by calling Elena the queenliest dead that ever died so young. He asks the group if they think Elena and Jonathan met in paradise, but he turns to find no one around. Hearing a low growl, he follows the noise around the corner, and at first, there's nothing there. Only a window down a long, narrow hallway. But Carl blinks, and the shadow of a woman stands before him. Is it Margaret? He calls to her, but the figure runs away. Frightened, he steps backwards to flee when he hears a voice behind him. Margaret, Tony, and Jack stand behind him, laughing as Carl falls to the floor. It's all just a cruel joke. Margaret helps Carl up, her excitement focused on the fact they've reached the suicide suite, the place where so many people have come to end their lives. Carl stares down at the water below them. It's getting dark. The tide seems high, but what if it's not? He could die. Maybe they should try this another time. But Margaret, she's not having it. She didn't come all this way for nothing. She tells him he'd better give her a show just before she pushes him off the balcony, calling him a crippled loser as he falls into the water below, the sound of their laughter behind him. Want to know what happens to him? Well, clearly he survives because, he went on to murder a bunch of women, but the story then puts us right back into the present. Only we're not focused on Carl at the moment. Instead, Detective Rick Hill and his partner Anthony Miranda are investigating the murder of 3 boys around the age of 8. It's a triple homicide, the children displaying signs of abuse and poisoning. They're mostly unclothed and their bodies have been drained of blood. The house they were found in was abandoned, and when Detective Miranda asked about the 4th body, one of the responding officers is surprised. What does he mean by a 4th? There's only toys in this house. Toys and the poor children who lay at their feet. But Miranda notices 4 children in all the drawings around the house, 4 beds, so there must be a final child. Detective Hill notices a large book underneath one of the boys and pulls it out from under him, revealing it to be the story of Hansel and Gretel. Realization hits and Detective Hill rushes to the kitchen, opens the oven door, and finds the 4th child curled up inside. He's emaciated and weak, but he's still alive. As Hill performs CPR, begging the boy to breathe, tears begin to fill his eyes. It's just like when his son Stephen died from cancer, the memory of him lying there haunting Detective Hill. It consumes him and will impact his resolve to solve this case throughout. Meanwhile, present-day Carl is busy snooping on Elena Dyer. She takes box after box inside Ilsa's old home, but one is quite large, and Carl wonders what could be inside. He gets closer, becoming a bit fixated on Elena's, trunk, and she notices. He tries to play it off, but fails, yet Elena doesn't seem to mind. She flirts with him, offering him a warm dinner in exchange for his help unloading the rest of her boxes. She reminds me of Margaret here, using her charm to get what she wants, easily manipulating Carl, who once again falls for the tiniest possibility of companionship. He's such a lonely soul, and back in the water after Margaret pushes him in, we hear his inner thoughts as he drifts further down. I think of life as a bubble, moving around gracefully in the sea of destiny. Sometimes they're colorful, sometimes they stick together, and sometimes they're just alone, separated from the big group. Like a little miracle of air in the vastness of the ocean, a bubble dances all the way to the top, always moving, always changing, always following an unpredictable course. Such is life. And at any second it pops and disappears. As fragile as a little bubble, our existence vanishes. They say that to die, the only thing it takes is to be alive. You never know how a bubble is going to be. What shape is it going to take? But you can be sure it will pop eventually. And what comes after? Is that really all there is? As Carl sinks to the bottom of the lake unconscious, his suspenders catch onto the finger of a woman's corpse. Is she Elena Shepherd or one of the many souls who came after? We don't know for certain, but her body looks as if she's been sitting on the rocks, waiting for Carl for a very long time. He opens his eyes and stares into her face, a mixture of flesh and bone, her eyes now sockets, her teeth bared as her lips have rotted away. Something overtakes Carl, an emotion he can't quite describe. He makes it home, drenched from the lake and the pouring rain outside, and he decides. There's nothing special about the living. They're just empty, selfish, soulless shells who only listen to their own voices. They do nothing but disappoint and leave you lonely. As we look around his room, he is all alone. We don't know where his parents are, and it appears this is the same house he's always lived in, the one in the present day. And next door is Margaret and her family. He peeks out the window, watches their picture-perfect family as they sit down for dinner, and thinks that most of the lucky ones like that don't deserve the air they breathe. But it doesn't matter. He doesn't need the living any longer. So he does something which is just so sad when you realize that he's just a young boy at this stage who hasn't yet gone on to become the Carl we know in the present. He draws a pair of faces on 2 sheets of paper, tapes them to 2 brooms, and positions them on opposite ends of the table. His makeshift family complete, he pours 3 bowls of soup and smiles. Meanwhile, the detectives are busy trying to solve the case of the 3 murdered children. Many of their drawings show a woman in a red dress, and they need to find her. As luck would have it, the hospital calls to inform them that the sole survivor is awake. He's not speaking, has been through quite a shock, and mysteriously, there are no records of his existence whatsoever. He is drawing, though. On his paper is a doodle of 4 boys, and this is Hill's way in. He asked about the woman in red, the one in the drawings. The boy doesn't have to be afraid anymore, Hill tells him. They'll catch the monster who did this. But the boy finally speaks and tells Hill not to talk about his mother like that. I'm the one who failed her, he says. My brothers were saved. She was just helping us, and I cowered. I betrayed her. I wasn't a good son. We're back at Elena Dyer's house. The news plays in the background, telling the world that the boy who survived has woken up from his medically induced coma, and attempts have been made to interrogate him to learn about the killer. Meanwhile, Carl rings the doorbell, excited for his date with Elena, and she immediately jumps on the chance to compliment him, to gauge his level of interest. She comments that Carl's wife hit the jackpot when she found him, and Carl replies that he's not married, which makes me wonder, does he no longer believe the delusion he's created, or is he playing along in hopes of making her his Elena? But is she married? He sees a lot of children's toys lying around, but Elena says it's complicated. She wants the perfect man to start a family with, and Carl looks like a family man, a loving one, she says. She asks him to dance along to the song Fresa Salvaje, a stark contrast to Boda Negra in the beginning. Boda Negra was about love and obsession after death, while Fresa Salvaje, love and obsession in life. The dances likewise contrast one another, as Elena Dyer is alive and vibrant while she dances, while the previous Elena was posed, rigid, and decaying. As Elena comments that she and Carl complete each other, that their meeting was destined, he leans in for a kiss. But first he needs to do something for her. To show he cares. She needs him to complete her family. She needs the boy, someone like them that's unique and separate from the group. The bubble that's all alone. Back in the past, Carl floats in the water, staring back into the face of the corpse beneath the lake. That is, until his alarm clock rings and wakes him. He greets one of the brooms with the paper faces, calling it his dad, but then comments that the whole idea is pathetic. They're just brooms with faces, of course. They can't talk back. He arrives at school noticing the flyer for the upcoming dance when Margaret enters the classroom. She had fun yesterday at the hotel and wants to know if he did too. Then she asks him to the dance. Tony and Mike snicker behind them, and Carl seems to realize that Margaret's just playing with his emotions again. He thanks her but turns her down, which she doesn't seem to take well. After school, Carl returns to the cliff, and we learn that he's pulled the corpse out of the lake and hidden her within a cave. He thinks that she must have been down in the lake for a long time and that maybe she'd be more comfortable here. And, well, he needed the company. She was there yesterday when he fell. She saw the way the others treated him, and he's so tired of not having anyone in his life. But the corpse, Elena, he thinks he understands her. How desperate she felt before she took her life. Sometimes he wants to run away from it all too, but she's still with him, still looking at him. But she won't say anything. Why won't she? Is it because she's actually like the rest of them? He turns to leave, tears in his eyes. He just needs a friend, someone to be there for him, and he faces the corpse, convinced that he just heard her speak. Detective Hill and Miranda arrive at a forest where an older crime has just been brought to light. The bones of 4 children have been unearthed, their bodies also drained of blood prior to their deaths. They were killed at least 5 years ago, according to the police, and this time the killer left behind evidence. Medical tubes were used to drain the blood, and their labels are connected to a clinic for foster children that coincidentally was closed 5 years ago due to some disappearances. The abandoned clinic is nearby, so the detectives go to investigate. Inside, they find an older woman kneeling at the feet of 4 mannequins tied together by red tubes. They command she puts her hands in the air, but instead she chuckles, realizing that she has killed again. Back at Carl's house, he's busy talking with Elena. Not Dyer, but the Ilsa stand-in, the one with the cracked mask. He's telling her about Dyer, how different she is from everyone else, how he can sense that she's just like him. But it seems Elena has some thoughts of her own, and Carl doesn't like them. He calls whatever she's saying lies and claims a woman like her could never do something like that. She wants a family with him. Well, he means him and Elena, but it seems Elena is upset that Carl never told Dyer about her, even though she's his favorite. After all, they've been together for a long time. But then she asks him a question to which he replies, "Yes, of course I remember Margaret. I also remember how she got what she deserved, and maybe you will too if you don't shut up." Now obviously, Ilsa's body isn't really speaking to Carl, but I find it interesting that this conversation he's created reveals his doubts, guilt, and shame. It seems he might suspect Elena Dyer is the killer from the news. He did something to Margaret that's resurfaced, and he still isn't certain if someone can truly accept him. But he's at odds with these thoughts and pushes them onto Ilsa's corpse as a way to confront them. He gets so angry with it all that he tapes her body into a wardrobe as punishment. Speaking of punishment, I assumed when reading this that Carl had no parents because of the broom family he created, and I was right. He has a horrible dad who drinks and beats him when he's angered, so yeah, I don't really see any parents around here. His dad is angry because the last time he was home, however long ago that was, his phonograph was on a table, but now it's missing. He leaves Carl with a bloody nose and a warning. His phonograph better return before he does in a few days' time, or else. Carl wipes the blood from his face, looks down at it, and smiles. That's because the phonograph is in the cave with Elena and Carl is praising her for her brilliant idea. He starts the music while preparing for their grand event. He steals Margaret's hair clip from school and pushes Elena's hair back with it. He paints the mask and borrows a box of lights from the classroom. Then he hangs the hand-cut banner he's created that simply says, "Dance." At the abandoned clinic, the older woman tells the detectives about the lady in red, Elena Dyer. They were both nurses at the clinic, and many of the staff didn't care about the children or give them adequate care. One day a boy disappeared, but the orphanage administration didn't do much to find him, assuming he had escaped. Other kids disappeared soon after, and that's when the woman noticed something strange. Elena was taking one of the children out of the premises, so she followed her. Elena had tied the 4 children upside down in the trees with several tubes inserted into their necks, draining them completely of their blood. The woman tried to stop her, but it seems Elena might have wounded her greatly in the process, all so she could bathe in the blood of those poor, innocent boys. Now the older woman comes to the abandoned clinic to pay her respects to those children, the ones Elena never allowed to grow up. She tells the detectives that once Elena finds her prey, she'll never stop, just as we see the boy from the hospital is missing. Wrapped in a blanket, he rides beside Carl in his truck towards Elena, the one he called Mother in the beginning. At Elena's house, the boy draws a picture of the 3 of them and Carl loves it. They look like a proper family, happy even. He's grown fond of the boy in such short time and finally seems to be letting go of the corpse Elena. He's finally found what he's been looking for all these years, and the boy tells him he's a good man. He's glad he got to meet him before his mother purifies him. The boy accidentally cuts his finger on the drawing and begins to bleed. Carl offers to fix it, but the boy is worried that Elena will be upset because blood is impure, full of sin. Only his mom can cleanse him. At that moment, Elena enters and asks Carl to leave so they can clean up the boy's wound. She all but slams the door in his face, telling Carl she'll be in touch and thanks a lot for the visit, even though they were just playing house a few moments before. Now that she has what she wanted, she doesn't need Carl anymore. Back in the past, the plans for the school dance are being finalized. The teacher assigns students to different tasks, but when Carl's name is called, he tells her he won't be attending because he has a previous commitment. Mike and Tony are beating him up after class, threatening to give him a makeover for his special party when Margaret intervenes. He wakes to find her standing over him and is taken aback. What could she possibly want? Why can't she just leave him alone? They've been nothing but horrible to him after all. Margaret apologizes for pushing him off the balcony and claims that she wants to be his friend. She also knows what he's been up to. He's planning a dance, and she's pretty sure it'll be much better than anything the school is going to do. She says she would love to be his date so that he will show her his secret. Then she kisses him, promising that after, his secret will be just for the 2 of them. The boy now missing from the hospital, the detective's only hope is a small strand of hair left in the room. DNA analysis reveals it belongs to none other than Ilsa Averina, Carl's previous tenant. She's been reported missing for a couple of months now, and prior reports noted an interview with Carl, but it was relatively unremarkable. There's also been an update on the search for Elena Dyer. Apparently her family used to lead a cult-like church in the 80s, and Elena was said to have a powerful effect on people, leading and performing the healing rituals for the church. 2 years after the church opened, however, it burnt down and Elena went missing. Her father, the pastor, is still alive though. With limited time, the detectives split up. Hill goes to interview the pastor and Anthony Miranda pays Carl a visit. Mr. Dyer is in a living center for the elderly and suffers from Alzheimer's. He's unresponsive to many of Hill's questions, but when he mentions Elena, Mr. Dyer speaks. He's confused at first, believing he and his daughter must prepare for Mass at the church, but Hill reminds him the church is long gone now. He eventually tells Hill that Elena was chosen by God to be his sin eater. She helped people all over town, but after a year of it all, she started losing her mind. Time is running out for the boy, and Hill needs to know where Elena could be. He asks Mr. Dyer if he knows of her whereabouts, and he says every time he needs to speak with her, he turns to the Bible, that all the answers are inside of it. Hill leaves, but is stopped by a nurse. Mr. Dyer wanted him to have the Bible on his nightstand. Hill opens it, revealing a letter from Elena, postmarked from Virginia. Ilsa and Carl are in Virginia, and now, Hill realizes, so is his partner. His partner, who is at the moment having coffee in Carl's house. Carl claims he hasn't seen Ilsa in a couple of months. When asked about the wheelchair in his home, he states that his wife left him and never returned. He lies well, too easily in fact, but then Detective Miranda asks about Carl's new tenant. Carl claims he is all right, but he's never in. The house is always empty, yet the detective saw a red car in the driveway, so he asked to visit and ask a couple of questions. Carl tells him of course and says he's going to get the keys. Meanwhile, Miranda spots something near the wardrobe. Strands of hair. He opens it, finding Ilsa taped to the wall inside. Carl sneaks up behind him with a knife, but Miranda is able to disarm him. He pulls his gun, but can no sooner utter hands in the air before he's shot dead. Elena stands at the front door with her gun in hand, announcing that it's time for the cleansing to begin. In the past, it's also finally the night of the big dance. Carl has put together a Mad Hatter costume inspired by the school's own dance theme of Alice in Wonderland. There's only one thing missing: the 10-6 label for his hat, which unfortunately is stuck beneath the pillow under his father's arm. He lies sleeping on the couch, a bottle beside him, and Carl for some reason decides that this label is worth his life because he attempts to take it. He actually manages to grab it from underneath his dad, only for his father to wake immediately after and punch him in the face. He's furious now, telling Carl that starting tomorrow he'll no longer go to school. Instead, he'll work with him at the mill. He takes the hat label and begins eating it as Carl's punishment, but the paper gets stuck in his throat. He can't breathe and demands Carl to help him. Once his father lies dead on the ground, Carl smiles, happy that he can still make the dance. Present-day Carl is now burying Detective Miranda in his basement. Elena is sloppy and he doesn't like it. He also doesn't like that she's now in his garden, finding his dancing machine perfect for her cleansing ritual. She feels as if it was made for her to fulfill her destiny. Carl wants to focus on fixing everything now the detective is dead, but Elena says she has all the time she needs for the boy's cleansing. Carl tells her to leave the boy alone and questions what the cleansing even is, to which Elena tells him the boy is an impure child born in sin. She is the only one who can wash the sin away and save his soul. Shovel in hand, Carl warns her to leave the boy alone, and this time, for the first time in his life, he's not swayed by the promise of companionship. He's done falling for her tricks. Just then, the boy appears, wondering why they're both fighting. Carl turns to him, telling him to get his things so they can leave together, just as Elena hits him in the head with his own shovel, knocking him unconscious. Young Carl is so late for the dance. He hopes Margaret hasn't left. She's promised to be his date, to share his secret and everything. He runs to the entrance of the cave and, relieved, finds her standing there, dressed as Alice. She's dying to see what's inside. "Fine, Margaret. I'll tell you my secret," adult Carl mutters before waking to find he's been tied to a chair in the garden. While he was out, Elena has tied the boy to the machine, and Carl shouts to her, telling her this is all insane. They're supposed to be a family and should be protecting one another. The boy tells Carl from now on he will finally be pure. Suddenly, police sirens can be heard and Elena leaves to check it out. "Carl," the boy calls out. "She says it's my destiny, but I don't want to die. It's like the last time all over again. I don't want to die today." Carl promises he won't let that happen, and using a piece of metal from his brace, he manages to cut himself free. Outside, Detective Hill and other police officers have the place surrounded. He wants the child and his partner back. Elena watches from the front window while Carl pushes the boy through the rose hedge, telling him to follow the detective's voices. The boy begs for Carl to come with him, to escape too, but Carl's decided he can't go on like this anymore. Saving the boy is the only thing he has to somehow redeem himself. He realizes that his life up until this point has been rooted in fantasy, and he doesn't want the boy to end up like him. Elena returns, ready to complete the ritual before the police barge in. But once she realizes Carl has set the boy free, she's furious. As she's shouting at Carl, we see how Margaret reacted to the corpse in the cave back in the past. Carl is introducing her to Elena, who he's also dressed as Alice. Margaret is obviously shocked, but then she sees her hair clip, and she has to know. Why did Carl dress the corpse up like her? He says that he guesses Elena wanted to be just like her. Carl's past and present begin to collide. Margaret and Elena both fading in and out to humiliate and shame him all at once. They call him worthless, repulsive, and pathetic. They're both disgusted by him living with a corpse, and Elena would never in a million years have a family with him. He tells them both to shut up, to quit taunting him, but they don't, and he snaps. We see his hands around Margaret's neck, then Elena's, choking the life out of them both. He tried to be like everyone else, but they judged him. He thought they understood, but in the end, they were just like everyone else. So he's fixing them both, their deaths making them more human to him now more than ever before. Outside the house, the boy finds Detective Hill, and now that he's safe, Hill gives the command to open fire. Never mind that he didn't find Detective Miranda, but okay. His entire life, Carl has been alone. No mother, a monster of a father, and no friends to call his own. His awkwardness and brace made him different, and he was an outcast that was shunned and ignored. But then he found Elena, and his life was changed. The bullets are flying, breaking everything in their path. His hands find a wet spot on his body, and he realizes it's his own blood. But his mind is on Poe, and something he once said. The boundaries which divide life from death are at best shadowy and vague. Who shall say where the one ends and where the other begins? And I loved you with a love that was more than love. Elena was his friend, his company, his beloved. As his life begins to slip away from him, he wonders, was it all real or a dream within a dream? He falls to the floor as the tape on Ilsa's body begins to pull away from the wardrobe. She falls out, landing beside him, her face still in the cracked mask, turned toward his. There were times when he thought his actions were wrong, despicable, and selfish. But being next to her now, he feels this has always been the right thing. We're taken back to the past one last time, long enough to see the mask has been placed on Margaret's body. The young Carl's eyes filled with joy as his cycle of replacement bodies for Elena begins. To him, Elena was more than just a corpse in the lake. She was someone who listened to him and, he thought, kept him sane in a cruel world. To him, her soul survived death, and now he believes that she'll always be with him in death, just as she was in his life. Carl's story was inspired by a radiology technologist of the same name, Carl Tanzler, who committed an unthinkable act in 1933. According to the Key West Art and Historical Society, he met 21-year-old Elena when she was taken to the Marine Hospital in Key West for tests regarding her tuberculosis infection. Carl was assigned to draw her blood and perform her x-ray, and it was love at first sight for him. To Carl, Elena was the beautiful, dark-haired woman he saw in visions as a child, destined to be his true love. Interestingly, he also was previously married with a wife and children, but apparently they couldn't stand being around him anymore. I wonder why. However, Elena's prognosis was grim, with little time left to live, so Carl paid her visits frequently at her parents' home and, pretending to be a doctor, tried curing her with his own experimental ideas. Unfortunately, Elena died on October 25, 1931, 18 months after the two met. She was 22 at the time, and Carl was 53 years old. After her death, he sponsored the construction of an elaborate tomb for her and visited her grave almost every night, injecting her with formaldehyde in hopes of keeping her appearance as lively as possible. It was even said that he had a phone installed into the tomb so that he could speak with her on the nights that he was unable to visit. Months after her death, he removed her body from the tomb and transferred it to his wingless airplane near the hospital, towing her body in a toy wagon. He claimed to be guided by her spirit's voice, and for over 2 years, Carl did all manner of things to Elena's body in attempts to preserve her. He reconstructed her face with plaster, silk, and wax, embedded glass eyes into her head, used wire coat hangers in place of bones, and even made a wig out of real human hair. He also dressed her in a wedding gown with a veil and silk flowers. Apparently, he also built a spaceship for her with the belief he could take her body into space to revive her via space radiation. Eventually, the rumors of small-town Key West spread, and neighbors reported seeing him buying women's clothing frequently even though he lived alone, and through the window they could see him dancing with what appeared to be a life-sized doll. Thankfully, someone eventually reported him and the police raided his home, but he was later declared mentally incompetent, and with the statute of limitations up for his crime, Carl Tanzler walked away a free man. Elena's body was later put on display at the Dean Lopez Funeral Home and was viewed by almost 7,000 people over the span of a few days. She was later dismembered, placed in a small metal box, and buried at an undisclosed location to prevent Carl from ever finding her again. This was such a strange, disturbing story, made even more eerie by its true historical roots. I really debated over covering this comic because of the true crime and real people involved. I think there's justification for sharing true events like this if we learn something from them, but I also want to avoid any potential disrespect or profiting from a real tragedy that's not my own personal lived experience. So with that said, I've decided this video won't be monetized. Instead, I'll leave a link below to the Jed Foundation should anyone wish to donate. The Jed Foundation is a worthy organization that promotes social connectedness to help reduce loneliness and build resiliency and life skills, as well as other suicide prevention efforts. So please donate if you are inclined or are able to do so. And while I don't necessarily agree with using Carl and Elena's true names in the reimagining, Jaramillo made the comic into its own unique story, and there's no doubt it did its job of evoking a definite feeling of repulsion, but also a bit of empathy for Carl. He can't be excused for his desecration of the dead or his murders. However, although he was intelligent, well-read, and mechanically inclined, his loneliness overshadowed absolutely everything. Isolated and belittled most of his life, his idea of acceptable relationships became fractured and warped in an attempt to meet his emotional needs from childhood onward. But again, his loneliness didn't give him the right to use Elena nor the other women who followed as his companions after their deaths. This internal voice guided him, believing it to be Elena, but in reality, Elena, Margaret, and the other women he killed thereafter were robbed of their autonomy and consent. They were robbed of their voices. And when reading this and Elena's true story, I couldn't help but compare Carl's connections to the dead with the recent upsurge in AI companionship of all things. Clearly, one is very taboo and far more bizarre than the other, yet both create this illusion of a mutual relationship, though the affection is one-sided in both cases. AI and the dead can't comply or consent, and it seems that no matter how introverted we may be, social connection is a fundamental human need, just like food, sleep, and shelter. And what's crazy is that Carl was so close to having the human companionship he always wanted. The boy Elena wanted to sacrifice didn't see him as a monster, but as a good person, and there was potential there for a genuine friendship and even more of a family kinship to form. However, Carl's past finally caught up with him, and it was too late. He had horrible experiences growing up, there's no denying that, and he developed more of a victim complex, blaming his loneliness on the living. Maybe Carl could have had a better ending, one with true companionship, if he was able to break free from that mentality and reframe his life as a survivor of that pain and trauma instead of harming others, but we'll never know how different his life could have been. We do know that loneliness and isolation can change people, and there is no quick fix. It takes time, energy, and courage to reach out to others when you're used to the cycle and routine of a lonely life. And sometimes, your efforts may go unnoticed. And maybe like Carl, the first few people you try to connect with, they might not be your people. But it doesn't mean you should give up, because at the end of the day, everybody needs somebody, and you never know who will come your way or how different your life can be from one day to the next. But as always, I want to know what you think. What did you think about Elena? Did you find it as repulsive and wild as I did? Did you find it disturbing because it was tied to true historical happenings? And do you want to see me cover more comics? I know I talk about them kind of in between a lot of the gaming videos, but if it's something you're interested in, please definitely let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Here's another one of my videos. And as always, may your nightmares be strangely cozy.